Hello, this is your friend Holland Timmins, otherwise known as the Connoisseur, and today we'll be looking at The Complete Calvin and Hobbes by Bill Watterson. This is a fantastic hardcover collection. As you can see, it is now in paperback as well. Has an introduction by Bill Watterson, full color cover and spot art from Watterson's classic collections, and all the special illustrated stories and poems that appear in previous Calvin and Hobbes books. Just a second. As you can see, there are 4 books, all in soft cover. This is a fantastic collection, actually. It costs about $100 USA and $100 Canada, $110 Australia, $150, I believe that's New Zealand, and £70 UK. Calvin and Hobbes ran from 1985 to 1995 for about 10 years. It is a fantastic comic book and deals heavily with philosophy. Calvin is around 10 years old, and he has a pet tiger named Hobbes, who to everybody else is a stuffed animal, but to Calvin, Hobbes is real. Calvin has an overactive imagination, as do all small children, but the question is, what is the nature of reality? Is Hobbes real? Is he not? Is Spaceman Spiff actually real? Calvin often dreams about being Spaceman Spiff. There's a lot of questions about the nature of reality in this. Hobbes himself is named after the philosopher Thomas Hobbes. And a lot of the questioning reality comes from René Descartes, who came up with the Descartesian graph, I believe. But he also was sincerely doubting his own senses, and he came to the conclusion, I think, therefore I am. Well, Calvin thinks, therefore he is, and whatever Calvin thinks, it is. And that's a great way to look at it. Questioning the nature of reality is something The Matrix did 4 years after Calvin and Hobbes ended. So you could call this The Matrix before there was a Matrix. Bill Watterson did not like the idea of merchandising Calvin and Hobbes. He wanted to keep the integrity of the strip. As he said in the introduction, he was asked on an earlier strip to include a robot so they could merchandise it. He was asked to include a robot he did not create in a strip he did create just to sell merchandise, which led to him not wanting to merchandise anything and to keep the integrity of the strip, as I already said. Calvin and Hobbes proved so popular that Calvin and Hobbes proved so popular that both Steven Spielberg and George Lucas called up Bill Watterson to ask him if they could do an animated movie based off Calvin and Hobbes. He was gracious enough to take their phone calls, but he told them thank you but no thanks. And I think he hung up on them. I wasn't there, so I wouldn't know exactly what happened or what was said, but that's about the gist of it. Excuse me. Anyway, so Calvin and Hobbes, a classic strip for all ages. I grew up reading the strip. I just recently reread it. It's still as brilliant and funny as ever. And I would highly recommend it to anyone interested in good comics. If you are sick of the comic book industry as it is now, either go for back issues or do what I'm doing, which is going to comic strips. Comic strips are a great way to enjoy the art form, and you can't do better than Calvin and Hobbes. It's just really hard to compete. In my opinion, Bill Watterson is one of the 3 greats of comics. There's Carl Barks, who did Donald Duck and Uncle Scrooge in Walt Disney's Comics and Stories. There's Jeff Smith, who is known for the book Bone. And then there's Bill Watterson and his Calvin and Hobbes collection. So yeah, those are the three greats in my opinion. And none of them do superheroes. So yeah. Do you like Calvin and Hobbes? Do you somehow not like Calvin and Hobbes? Feel free to comment. Feel free to share. Feel free to like and subscribe. This is your friend the Connoisseur, signing off.